We need to talk about evaluating sources. And how do we find whether a source is valid information or not? I call this presentation Using Crap to Cut Through the Crap. So how do we know what is a valid source? I mean, you could just guess, right? Apparently not. Well, you found one that agrees with you. That must be valid. Not so much. What if you use the crap method? Aha! Use the crap method. Okay, now wait a minute. Did I say crap? Well, yes, but no. Not that kind of crap. This kind of crap. C-R-A-A-P. Crap. Currency, relevance, authority, accuracy, and purpose. We'll go through each of these one by one. Naturally, we start with the C, currency. Is the information timely? Now here, currency does not refer to money. Although that is a meaning of currency, it's not this meaning of currency. Here, currency means current. So you find, when was the information posted or published? Has the information been revised or updated? And does your topic require current information, or will older sources work as well? Now we'll take, for example, medical procedures, okay, and a fairly routine life-saving procedure such as the appendectomy. If your appendix bursts, a surgeon needs to remove it before you die. That's how that goes. Okay. Well, should your surgeon use the 200-year-old method or the new method? Well, I've read some old medical procedures and read about how they performed surgery in the early 1800s. And I would very much rather my surgeon use modern technology and modern procedures. The old stuff is, frankly, horrifying. I invite you to look up how they did surgery in the old days on your own time. It's pretty scary stuff. Now there, it's gonna matter whether your information is old or new. Another, for instance, would be something like a timeline of a specific day. Now, you could take the timeline of the day that Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, and you could go with somebody's written timeline in 1900 or 1950 or 2000. As long as the information is preserved and the timeline is there, it doesn't matter when it was written. You also need to look at whether the links are functional. If you're looking at a source on the web links matter. Because if the links are no longer maintained, as in you click on something and it goes to a broken place, you get the 404 not found, that means the site is no longer being maintained, and you cannot for sure know that the information is current. So that's our C. Then we go to R. R was relevance. Is the information important? Is it relevant to your topic? That means, does the information relate to your topic? Does it answer your question? Who is the intended audience exactly? Is the information at an appropriate level? Or is it too elementary? Or maybe too advanced? So, let's tie those together. I mean, if it doesn't relate, then you shouldn't use it. Even if you find a really nifty quote, I mean like a really good quote, a quote that you think is an awesome quote, And that quote comes from an article about rabies in brown squirrels in Central Park, New York City. But your paper is about how the French make cheese. Even though that's a really awesome quote you found, it's not relevant. And therefore it's a bad source. As far as the intended audience goes, and the elementary or advanced question, if you take, for example, a research chemist who is writing for his peers, other research chemists, it is likely that he's using very advanced language. You're not so likely to understand him. Now, that's not an insult to you. I'm not so likely to understand him either because I'm not a research chemist. And each jargon, or each profession has its own unique jargon. And the jargon of chemistry is different from what I know. So you're not likely to understand that because the language is too advanced. Well, if you find another research chemist who's writing not for her peers, other research chemists, but instead she's writing for the general audience, for regular folks like you and me, you're pretty likely to understand everything she writes. And even though she and he are giving the exact same information, hers is more understandable, and therefore it's a better source because you know what she's saying. Now, on the flip side of the coin, from too advanced, we do have far too basic. If it's too basic, you'll know. The language seems too elementary. It seems like it's not really answering the hard questions of research. So if you were doing a research paper that required you to find something from research chemistry, and you found a little kid's book that answers the question, what is chemistry and how does it improve our lives, published by some big chemical firm, it's far too elementary. It wouldn't tell you anything about your very specific question. Next, you need to look at how comfortable you would be citing this source in your research paper. Now, you'd probably be fairly comfortable citing a professional scientist who has a PhD after their name, works in a lab or a university, because they're a professional and they know what they're talking about. But you might not be all that comfortable citing the crazy person down the street who likes to talk to the signpost. Now, that crazy person might be nice, but that one time that the tree told them that the government is trying to invade your thoughts through the water you use to brew coffee should not be information you use, because you know that they're crazy. Now, you can feel sympathy for them and feel bad that they're in such a state of mind, and you can even help take care of them. But that's not something you want to cite in your paper. For the record, the one time that the crazy person is actually right, you still don't want to cite them in your paper. Because they are known to be a kook, known to be crazy, or worse, someone who is known to have falsified evidence, lied, or plagiarized, should never be trusted. So there, you just find, yes, they were correct that time. Go find a different source that says the same thing and doesn't cite them. Once someone is known to be a liar or a thief or crazy, you can't trust any of the work. Now, that's our R. We need to deal with the first A, authority. What is the source of this information? Who's the author, the publisher, the source, the sponsor? What are the author's credentials or organizational affiliations? Those things you find on the article or the posting itself. You'll see the author's name and any title they might have, and you'll see where they work or who they're writing for. If you don't, that's a big red flag. You also have to think about, is the author qualified to write on that topic? Now, just because somebody has a PhD after their name doesn't mean they're qualified to write on the topic you're researching. For instance, if you find that you're doing research in history and the author of your paper is saying something just amazingly interesting and cool and different than what all those other historians are saying, and when you go to check their credentials, you find that they're a PhD, yes, but not in history, over in physics, you may have a problem. Normally, someone isn't going to be an expert in multiple fields like that. It's also possible someone has an honorary PhD. Those things are given out and not earned. Just because you've got a PhD doesn't always mean you know what you're talking about. However, just because you've got a PhD doesn't mean you don't know what you're talking about. This is why you need to check their... If you're wondering why the slides are moving, it's because my dog hit the buttons on the spacebar, causing it to advance. I apologize for that. I'm not going to take it out. I'm just going to leave it in. With any luck, he won't also decide to chime in. Anyway, I was talking about how just because someone has a PhD doesn't mean they're wrong. You always have to check what are their affiliations and what exactly their degree was in. There we go. I'm back on topic. So let's take an example. We all know, or should know, that the Earth is a spheroid. In other words, it mostly is the shape of a ball. Now, humans have known this for a really long time. Okay, it was proven mathematically and through scientific observation thousands of years ago. And I didn't misspeak. I don't mean hundreds. I don't mean tens. I mean thousands. That's pretty cool. We have validated that math. We've checked the math. We have validated the science behind it, and we've gone above and beyond with new science, and we even left the planet, looked back, and found out, son of a bitch, it's a ball. Great. And yet there are people who will tell you that it's not a ball, it's flat, and looks more like a dinner plate. And they'll give you all kinds of so-called evidence, which is easily refutable. But then you also have to look at their credentials. When you have astronauts from many countries who have been off-planet and say, when we look back, it's round, it's a ball, that kind of starts to tell you it's not just some conspiracy of one country. When you have scientists from different time periods, thousands of years ago, hundreds of years ago, and even recently, confirming that, no, the planet has to be a ball, because otherwise gravity wouldn't function the way it functions. Otherwise, the way the sun rises and sets wouldn't function the way they function. Otherwise, this observable feature, that observable feature, and so on. And you have mathematicians who can confirm it. When you've got this going on over such a long period of time, that's evidence. And that evidence stacks up to mean that this planet, like all the other ones that we can see, is basically shaped like a ball. So what, you say? I'm a smart person, you say. I know it's shaped like a ball. Yes, you are. But some people aren't. And they think it's a disc, or a plate, or a frisbee, or any other shape other than a ball. And they lack a fundamental understanding of science. But they are easily misled and fooled by people with smart-sounding words who are spouting a load of bullshit. Now, this is why you check the author's credentials and organizational affiliations. You're not going to find an astrophysicist working at any university that says the Earth is flat. But you will find a society called the Flat Earth Society, and they promote the idea that the Earth is flat, and they defy you to prove them wrong. And time again, people have proven them wrong, and they say, well, no, that doesn't work that way. But it does. It's not a conspiracy. It's just the way it works. Kind of amusingly, in the 2010s, the Flat Earth Society hired a documentary crew so that they could do some of these science experiments and prove that the Earth is actually flat, like a plate. And they did their experiments, and they successfully proved that the Earth is a spheroid, a ball. And if you watch the documentary, and I don't remember the name of it, but you can usually find them if you look. If you watch the damn thing, what you find is the guy says, well, that didn't go right, looks directly at the camera crew and says, you guys aren't going to put this out, right? He's asking the filmmakers not to release the footage because he's wrong. Now, in real science, when scientists are wrong, they learn something from it, they change the theory, and they move on. They don't try to change reality. They change their theory. There's a difference there. So after that example, we also need to look at whether the contact information is there, like the publisher or an email address so that these people can be contacted. Because again, good sources are written by people who want to take credit for their work. Anonymous posts should not be trusted. Posts where you can't contact the researcher somehow should not be trusted. You also have to look at whether the URL reveals something. Okay. So let's look first at .edu. That's an education URL. These are issued to universities and colleges, and most of them are trustworthy sources. I say most because not all. Now, as you know, EPCC is epcc.edu, and we have lots of other things as part of our domain. We've got the my and the www and all kinds of crap. But at the end of it, it's epcc.edu. Okay, it's because we're an educational facility. Now let's look at a couple of universities. UTEP, that's the University of Texas at El Paso, is utep.edu. Great. They're an educational facility, and they're a university, and they're a Tier 1 research institution, and all that good stuff. Great university, and even relatively cheap. Cool. Southwest is also an EDU, and they're southwestuniversity.edu. Now, I'm not advertising for either of those two. I'm just telling you what their website is. I wouldn't trust a paper that came out of Southwest, but I'd trust one that came out of UTEP. The reason being, UTEP is a public not-for-profit research institution, whereas Southwest is a private, for-profit. Now, there's a difference. A not-for-profit school, even though, yes, they charge you, that doesn't mean free. We're not-for-profit, and you know we sent you a bill. A not-for-profit school is not trying to make money. They're just trying to not get a loss. So their main goal is to teach you something. Whereas a for-profit's main goal is to make money for their shareholders and other investors. I wouldn't trust information coming out of a for-profit if it contradicts that coming out of a not-for-profit. Because the odds are really good you're going to be able to find all the methodology that the not-for-profit used. You might not find the methodology that the for-profit used. Not all private schools are for profit. Harvard, for instance, is a university up in Massachusetts which is private, but it's not for profit. It's expensive as all hell, but it's still not for profit. Now we need to look at .gov. That stands for government. The odds are pretty good that you can trust information coming out of a government website. Now, I know certain members of the government lie, especially the elected members of the government. Representatives, senators, presidents, vice presidents, they lie. Mayors, governors, city councilmen, they all lie. Okay, fine. But as a whole, the government itself tends not to. Just because the person in charge lies doesn't mean that the government is lying. Now, sometimes there are extenuating circumstances. Sometimes it happens that a government organization is lying. That's very rare, and it tends to make the news. It's a big deal. So most of the time, you can trust information coming out of, like, the CDC or Housing and Urban Development or any of those. Okay, if it ends in .gov, most of the time you can trust it. Similarly, you can trust stuff that ends in .mil. That's a military site. Information there tends to be good, meaning truthful. Then we have these other three we have to deal with, .com, .org, and .net. Let's start with .com. .com is a commerce site. It means they are trying to sell you something. Now, I can't tell you exactly what they're trying to sell you, but they're trying to sell you something. Sometimes they're trying to sell you information. Sometimes they're trying to sell you products. Does not matter. .com means they're trying to sell you something. Do you trust information coming out of someone trying to sell you something? Probably you shouldn't. Because the information they're going to give you will bias whether or not you purchase whatever the hell it is they're trying to sell you. .org could be a club, could be an organization, could be lots of stuff. Any damn fool can sign up for a .org. And many have. And then .net is basically no better than a .org. I wouldn't necessarily trust information on a .org or a .net unless I could validate the information somewhere else. The same goes for .com. I wouldn't trust anything coming out of a com unless I could validate it somewhere else. edu, mil, and gov, most of the time you can trust it. But again, you always want to have more than one source. The next A is accuracy. Now this is your reliability, truthfulness, and correctness. You got to look at where the information comes from and whether that information is supported by evidence. Was the evidence reviewed or refereed? You see, academic journals are reviewed by other academics. And it's done in an anonymous way so that you don't know whose paper it is you're reading. Now, it lends some honesty to the peer review process. By not knowing whose it is, if it's your best buddy and he's wrong, you'll still say it's wrong because you don't know it's your best buddy. But if it's your academic rival and they're right, you'll still say they're right because you don't know that it's your rival. It keeps people from having their personal emotions interfere with their review of a paper. Can you verify any of the information in your source, either from another source or from your own personal knowledge? You can use your personal knowledge. For instance, if you find a paper that says that you can stop gravity just with the power of your mind, and if you think about it hard enough, you can make things float, well, you can look at that, know it to be wrong, try concentrating real hard, and if it don't float, you know it's bullshit. Does the language or tone seem unbiased and free of emotion? Because if not, that's a red flag. Science is written in a fairly emotionless, toneless, kind of boring way. Most things in academics are. Whether it's a journal of higher ed talking about the latest pedagogical methods, or the Modern Language Association's quarterly, talking about recent discoveries in the writings of Chaucer, or the Journal of Astrophysics. They're all written kind of dry and boring. Whereas often you'll find some colorful emotions in people's so-called counter-evidence, in which they will become very excited in their writing. Well, there's a reason that academics write that way. They're trying to convey a logical point. They're not trying to persuade you. They're just trying to tell you something. If you're persuaded, good for you. If you're not, also okay. And then finally, this last one is a huge red flag. If there are spelling errors, grammatical errors, typographical errors, that kind of thing, that's a huge red flag that you probably should skip this particular source. You see, editors will find that stuff, and they'll send it back to the author to be fixed. When things are sent out to publish with spelling, grammatical, and typo errors, it tells you that not much care was taken, and probably no more than one set of eyes was ever on the paper. You shouldn't trust it, because it's likely invalid. Next, we have to look at the P in crap. Purpose. Why does this information even exist? Is it out there to sell you something? Is it out there to entertain you? Is it out there to inform you of something? Do the authors or the sponsors make their intentions and purpose clear? Does the point of view appear objective and impartial? It should. Are there political or cultural or religious or institutional or even personal biases? If so, you should avoid that. So check for validity. You can check mediabiasfactcheck.com. That is an independent sourcing which will let you know the bias and truthfulness of media sources, television news stations, newspapers, magazines. Now, they're not going to have like your local ABC or NBC or CBS affiliate. But they will have ABC, NBC, CBS, national. They have a lot of online sources that they've reviewed and so on. Now, bias we'll talk about in another lecture. But facts, fact-checking, that stuff really, really matters. So if you want to check whether a politician is full of crap, and not the kind with two A's, you can turn to PolitiFact. Because you know, all those professional lying liars that we elect to run our lives, we can check what they say by using PolitiFact. You know, if Senator Smith says that the sky is purple and the rivers are running red with blood, and what this means is that the dogs are taking over, you can go check at PolitiFact to see, one, did he actually say that? Or is that just Senator Smith's enemies saying that he said something stupid? And two, if he did say it, is the sky purple? Are the rivers running red with blood? And are the dogs really taking over? Or is Senator Smith actually a wackadoo? I don't think they use the term wackadoo. You can also turn to the Washington Post Fact Check. You can find them just by entering Washington Post Fact Check into any search bar on Google or any other search engine you might choose to use. You'll find them. They check facts. That's their entire job, is to check facts and make sure that what is said, printed, etc. is accurate. And of course you can use the crap method, and you should use the crap method. So, take yourself a little break, and then come back for the next one.